Hey, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. So in here, we want to fix this problem of every plugin loading on every single page, because sometimes you don't want a plugin to load on a specific page. This is going to be our basic routing system. All right, so what we will do is we're going to need a JSON file. That file will contain information about each plugin so that we know when to load a particular plugin. So what we're going to do is go into the plugin. Let's try the header and footer plugin here. And I'm going to right click in the folder and say new file and save this file. This is going to be called the config.php file. Okay, so config.php file is going to be a JSON file. So you can save this as a JSON file if you want. You can say .json, but for now, let's leave it at .php. All right, so what I'm going to do is, this is a required file now in order to consider something a plugin. Config.php and plugin.php must be present. So let's create a new file here as well and save it as config.php. Actually, you know what? Let's save it as JSON. When you save it as JSON, at least the syntax of JSON will help us to see when we make a mistake. All right, so those are JSON files. So save, and even the home page, let's do the same. Let's save config.json. Okay. So now let's go through the JSON files one by one. I'm going to close all these files here. So let's start with basic auth. So in here, the JSON file should have opening and closing bracket like this. And in here, all we want to do is tell the browser or our system or framework what to do with this. So let's try with the name. Let's give the plugin a name. So this is the human readable version. So I'm going to call this basic authentication. And then we put a comma there. Second thing is we can put an ID like that. Now the ID is a text field as well that represents a unique string that represents the plugin. So I'm going to just say basic auth like that, because I know this is unique. There's no plugin in here that's like this. Now, if you're not sure or you don't know, when you give your friend, you may think, okay, they may have something like this. So you can give it a random number here, maybe AZRT something. I don't know, something just random to make sure that it's always unique. Because if there are two plugins that have exactly the same ID, that's going to cause problems, because one of them will not show. It's going to overwrite the data of the other one. Okay, so then we need to know whether this guy is active or not, because here we'll put true or false. So no brackets there whatsoever. So this is one way of switching off the plugin. In case you completely don't want to use a plugin, but you want to keep it in the folder, you can leave it at active is equal to false, something like that. And then you can put things like an index. So an index as well is a number that will allow us to determine which plugin to load first than the other. So as much as we are able to edit the priority of these functions here to see which one loads first, sometimes you just want to change how an entire plugin itself, not just its functions, is loaded. Because certain times, even though you prioritize this one, a specific function, you may find that you just need to prioritize the whole plugin, because you can still add code outside these levels here. So we're going to see how that is useful as well. And then finally, you can put routes here. So this is going to tell it which routes to be active on and which ones not to. So the first one is going to be on. This is going to be an array like that, and then the other one is going to be off, which is going to be an array as well. This is really the basics that you need. Now, of course, you can add other what's this? You can add other content to this. For example, who is the author of this? Those are things you can use because, for example, in my own system, I created a plugin manager where I just click buttons to switch these plugins on and off. And so this information like the author and stuff is shown in that plugin manager, right? So you can put an author, you can put author website, etc, etc. So any extra details, like also the thumbnail, which one is the thumbnail that represents your plugin, you can do that. This would be nice if you begin to sell these plugins to people that use this framework. Then you can put some thumbnails here, thumbnail.jpg or something like that, right? But for now, we don't need all of this. We just need the basics, everything here except these two. The other ones are, in fact, yeah, the other ones are required. Or maybe not index, but definitely, maybe not name as well. But what's really required, it will still run if you have the ID and you have the active and you have the routes. So this one has all the information we need, but I'll leave them out for the other ones. Actually, let me do it for the this one, the header footer as well. So this one, let's just say the name is header footer. I'll just call it header footer here to make it unique, and then routes as well. Okay, great. Now we're going to ignore this other one so that we see what kind of errors we can generate if that is not, or how we can ignore the other one if it doesn't have what we need. So basic authentication and header footer right there. Okay, so all of them are active and that's good. Now let's deal with this routes thing. How does this work? Well, for example, the basic auth, we can put information in here and say, oh, something like that. So what O is going to represent is that this basic authentication runs on every single page. So that's what O should represent. And then if we go to header and footer, same thing, this runs on all of them. So maybe let me copy this and put in the config of this one. We can remove it. We can just change the file name if we don't want it to show. So for now, because this is the only one that is required to run only on one page, so unfortunately I have to give it some stuff as well. So this one, we can say this one runs on the home page like that. So this represents the route itself that it can run on. So you can put multiple of these. I want it to run on the home page, on the admin page, etc, like that. And then there's also the off, which means this is where it shouldn't run, right? Now you may be thinking, okay, why can't I just specify where I want it to run? Why do I need the off side? Well, sometimes, for example, with basic authentication, you want this to run on every single page, right? But except maybe there are a few pages you don't want, maybe just one. Like for example, on the login page, you don't want it to run, or you don't want it to run on the 404 page or something like that, right? Now it would be hard to do this without putting this off button, because then you'd have to name all the routes that exist on this website and then just leave out the 404, which is not very practical. But like this, you eliminate the need to name all pages except this one. So that's why on and off are required sometimes. So let's empty that. All right, so what we need to do is collect this information before loading any plugin and then read from it to get instructions on how to handle that particular plugin. So that happens in the functions page where we are importing, where is that function? The load plugins function. So this one has to change a little bit. So how we're going to do that is, first of all, let me import the app array. So I'm just going to say global app, like that, because that's where I want to keep all the plugins that I have loaded. Instead of looping through plugin folders here, we're going to be looping through the app plugins, like that, because that's where we're going to add all the plugin data. And in here, there's going to be a JSON file. So instead of folder there's going to be a JSON file. And then within that JSON file, there's going to be a plugin path, right? So I'm going to duplicate this because I'm going to need it soon. I'll put it on the top there. So what I would do instead is say file is equal to, actually, we don't even need this. I can just say JSON here. And then inside, because JSON is an object, it's going to be an object. This one will have plugin path or something like that. Okay, so inside JSON, a plugin path, and then if that actually works, we're going to require that item over here. If the file exists, then load it. Okay. Okay, first of all, before we loop through here, it's always better to check if this is not empty. So if not empty, that, and then I'll duplicate this and that as well, like so. Let me push this down, then move these guys over. Okay, so if that's not empty, loop through it like that. Okay, great. Let me remove this. All right, so at this point, the first thing we're going to do is loop through the folders as well. So I'm going to come down here. Let me remove that. So let's do a for each loop, and this one will be plugins folder. As I don't need the keys here, I'll just say folder. Okay, so from here now, this comes into play. So we try to find a specific file that we want. So the first file is the JSON file in here. So file is equal to that. Instead of plugin.php, we want to find the JSON file. So that's the config.json. Okay, so we have to check if this file exists. So I'm going to do this. If it does not exist, we simply ignore that plugin. So if file exists, file, let me put that here, like so. Then we're going to say JSON is equal to, there's a function called JSON decode, which grabs some JSON string and converts that into an actual object or an array. In this case, we are converting to an object. Now you could convert it to an array by doing true like that. So JSON encode converts an object into a string, and then JSON decode converts the string back to an array or an object. So here we have to make sure that this is indeed an object. So I'm going to say if is object, like that. Okay, and what else do we need? And is set. I want to know if there is a valid remember what we added here. There's an ID, right? Because we need this to be the key for the plugin. So we need to confirm that that actually exists. So we're going to say if is set JSON ID, like that. Okay, so if that's set as well, then that's cool. Otherwise, we consider this JSON file invalid or even when it doesn't encode, it doesn't decode here. So with that in mind, everything seems cool, but let's add a few more things to this JSON file. Now, even before we do that, we can save this in the app and say plugins, right? And then save the JSON file. Now, it's not the JSON file, it's a JSON array, JSON object, because this is an object now. And that's the thing we're going to loop through here. We are looping through this array to get objects from here and check the plugin path. Okay. If that exists, then we do that. So instead of plugin path here, in fact, let's call it index file, like that. Okay. So index file. So that's the root to the index file. So we have to create it here before we add to that. So I'm going to say JSON index file is equal to. Now at this point, this is the part I was waiting for. So from this, I can copy that. Oh, actually, I've already used this, but this is fine. I'm going to copy this there. So this one looks for the plugin.php file. So that's the index file, right? Also, the thing is, it's possible that this file does not exist. So if it doesn't, we shouldn't add this to the list. So what we're going to do now is say something like, let's grab this though. Copy that and let me just put it over here. And we have to make sure that it exists first. So if file exists, file, like that. Okay. So here we can override the file path because we've already used the JSON data, so we don't need it to reference the JSON file there. So we can repurpose it here just fine. So if file exists, file, and instead of JSON here, we need to have the plugin. In fact, let me just grab this entire thing and put it here. So that's the file we're looking for. Otherwise, we say we do that instead. So let me move these guys up here. Okay, so if file does exist, then let's continue and add it to the plugins folder. So this is how we confirm that the config.json file exists and the plugin.php file exists before we actually move further. And we also confirm that at least the config file has an ID at minimum. Okay, so that is great. And then there's this part here where we have to load. But let's see. Also, we shouldn't add this item if there's no routing. We should check if it's on the correct route here. So what I'm going to do is say if this file exists, let's put an AND statement here and say I'm going to create a function called validate route. Something like that, and let's put in that JSON file. Okay, so if it's a valid route and the file exists, then let's continue here. So we have the index file, we have the plugin, I think we're just gonna call it path, and then this one will be called HTTP path, like that. Now there are reasons why we need both just the path, the actual path, and HTTP path. We're going to see how we use that in the future. But things like, for example, the CSS files and JavaScript files, you load those using the HTTP path. But when you're including files, like you're including PHP files, you don't need to use HTTP. You can just provide the actual path. So we're just putting those things in there just so we can use them when we need them. So now the path to this plugin is right here, where there's the plugin, the folder, minus this plugin.php side right? So that's the path. So I'm just going to grab this up to here. In fact, let me just grab the whole thing. I'm going to put it here on path and boom. So plugins, the folder, and just that slash at the end. So let me remove that. So that's the path. Great. Now we need the HTTP version of this as well. So in here, we're just going to put root because we know root is good. And the rest of it, because after root, we get there's HTTP root and then there's slash plugins there. Let me copy that. Because the plugins folder is inside the root directory here. So root ends us up here, then we can do slash plugins and then slash folder of the plugin and then slash there. Okay, so that's the HTTP path. Good. Now, instead of doing all of this, I can simply do this here. But maybe literal values are better. I don't even know. So, but I need a slash here actually. Something like that. But instead of repeating myself here, I can just grab this and put it over here. Like that. But then remove these plugins because it's already part of this. So just that slash and then that. Okay, goody then. Now this validate route needs to validate if this route, if this plugin has routes to this current page that we have. If there are none, then we don't include it. So at this point, we're just gonna copy this. So I'm gonna create a function over here. So I'm gonna say function validate route, and then we expect a JSON file like that. Okay, so this one will return false or true depending on the situation, right? So if you're using PHP 8 and above and you know this only returns true and false, we can put a boolean over here, and then here we can say object like that. So that expects an object, JSON, boop. But if you're not using PHP 8, this may be a little bit of a problem. You may need to get back and change some of this stuff. But since we are all moving into the future, it's better to do things this way. Okay, so that represents the return value, boop, true or false. This one represents what type of item this is expected to be. So if all things don't go very well, we're just going to say false. This should not be allowed. But if things go well, we'll put a return true somewhere. So at this point, we're going to say there's JSON data there that gives us the routes. So in the routes here, we start with the off button. So remember that on the routes here, for example, on the home page, this is only on the home page, but it's possible to write something like or, and then you put something in the off button there, at least one page. So we have to start by checking the off. Because if we find it in the on, for example, we find a route that we are on that is there in the on, and then if it qualifies in the on and then there's off there, we may be too late to do that. So let's start with the off side though. So I'm going to say if in array. Okay, so let's create an array first of all. Now in reality, this is an array because it's got square brackets here, unlike these objects that have these curly braces. This square one is an array. So this array, we can find it inside JSON because this is a JSON object, and then routes, and then on, right, or off. So let me just copy routes. So if in array, this is how you check if something is inside an array. So I'm looking for the page name, right? If this page name is inside the haystack. Now the haystack is the array. So this array is in the JSON routes off, like that. Okay, now it's also very possible that in the routing system here, you didn't put the on and off, but you didn't type it properly here. Then it should ignore that as well. So in order for it not to throw an error instead, let's just say if not empty this. So not empty checks if something exists, and then it's got some data, so which is very convenient for us. So if this is not empty, the off thingy, like that. Okay, so if this is not empty, which means we can check here if this is inside the array. So if it is, for example, then we're going to return false, right? So here we say return false, because if that page is there as part of the off, then we know we shouldn't display, this is not a valid route for this. Okay, so there we go. Now, if it's not in the array, then there's hope yet. Maybe it's there in the on. So let me come down here. Let's do that. So let's look for the on version. So if not empty, on, that's great. And then we say if in array, boom. So this one looks for if not in array. That's when we return false. But in this case, we have to return a true somehow. Because also, if it's not in the off section, then we take a breather. But is it part of the on section? That's the question. So here we return true. If it's in the array of on, we return true. Okay. Then also, finally, if there is the or, let me copy that. So it doesn't make sense for us to put or here on the off. It's just as good as just saying active is equal to false. Oh, by the way, we didn't even check for that. So we should check for that as well. Hopefully I don't forget. So I'm going to copy this. So let's just do a duplicate. All right, so I'm gonna move this up. Actually, even yeah, so I'm trying to see if when we have the or, then it should just return true as well. You know, instead of creating several if statements, let's just utilize what we have here. By the way, it's too long. Let's just say valid route. Same here. Okay. Okay, so within this, if we say if JSON on 0 is equal to or, like that, let's return true even then. Okay, good. But also we have to make sure that we don't generate errors here. So this has to be an array at least. So I'm just going to copy this and duplicate here. We say and instead of empty, we check for is array. So we make sure that this part is an array as well. So copy this and put it over here. So this is for the off. All right. So if it's all, let's return true. If there are actual routes, let's check if they qualify. And if none of this works, then let's return false. Alrighty then. So that is working out. Oh, by the way, yeah, we need to check that active thingy. So if is object JSON and is set ID, right? And also let's check if the Let me grab that. Let me check if it's active as well. So we're gonna do if is set false, I guess counts as not empty, right? So let's just do a quick if not empty. Boom. I've added too much of this. So if not empty, instead of ID, we do active, like that. Okay, then let's do that. And move this down here. So I'm just going to duplicate that and do this. Oops, sorry about that. So this is going to work only in specific specific situations. One, we need a config.json file. Two, we need a plugin.php file, and it needs to have an ID. And on top of that, it has to be active for it to work. And also we need to use this JSON ID here. So I'm gonna copy that and hold on a second. Oh yeah, it already exists, so it's part of this. I don't need to show it up there. Okay, so that is fine. I think things are working out as intended here. Very, very good. So let's test it out and see if things will still load as they do now. Okay, so no plugins were found. Please put at least one plugin in the folder. Okay, so something obviously went wrong. Okay, so loaded is equal to true only works if we actually loop through this part and manage this. So if loaded is false, then no plugins did load. So let's see, index file. So we didn't get to any of this. We can confirm this by doing echo and then doing here. Let's see if it's going to echo that. And it didn't, so. Okay, so let's try to figure out what's going on. So JSON in decode here. Let me come down here, let's do this. And to see if we're actually getting the JSON. So we are not. That's where the problem starts from, because now everything is empty here. So if we don't get any JSON files, then we are doomed. So the file does exist because we passed through here, which means file does exist. But let's look at what's happening. JSON decode. So plugins, basic auth, config.json. So all of this is actually working as intended. Right. Okay, so my mistake here. You see, this is a file here. This is the file path, not the actual file. So I always forget that. So what we need to do is do file get contents here. Okay, and then put file in there. So we get the contents of the file, put them in a variable. That's the one that we're going to JSON decode. So that should actually work. So let me refresh. Still no plugins found. Okay, good. Not to be dissuaded, let's put, wait a minute. Let's check it out. What does JSON now contain? Right? Okay, still empty, so that's not cool. So what I want to do now is do a file get contents on the file here and see if it actually returns some data. So back here. Okay, so it does return some data, which is nice, right? So somehow it's failing to convert this data into useful information. So maybe this comma, for example, that's at the end might be a problem. So let me remove that. Let's see if homepage will load. Okay, still no plugins. Let me just make sure all of them don't have a trailing comma on any of these things. So let's see. Okay, that's good. Okay, so we are getting somewhere. Attempting to read property index file on a string on line 74. So 74 of which file? Functions.php. Okay, so functions.php, line 74, where are we? Okay, so it's saying this property index file does not exist, but it should exist, right? Because it's right here. Huh. Okay. All right, what I want to do is go here. And let's do this. Let's try to echo stuff from there. Where else are we echoing stuff? So this is working just fine. Let's remove that. But here, let's see if we get something. Okay, so we do get something. That's good. So it does turn it into an object, which is great. And there is, looky there, index file. Okay. Plugin. Header, footer, plugin.php. Okay. Now, if you notice something, the folder name here. No, these are just folder names. Okay, that's fine. So the path to there and the HTTP path, that's good. But why can't it find this? What's going on? This is an object, right? Okay, so here it's saying if file exists, JSON. Okay, so let's check out what's inside JSON, shall we? Let's do this. That way we know what's missing. Yeah, okay. So header, footer, header, footer. What is happening? Okay, I'm just gonna do die over here. The first time we echo that, let's die. Okay, so there it is, header, footer. And that's definitely not what I'm looking for, because that's a string and this is not. This shouldn't be a string, so it should be an object. Oops, what am I doing? App plugins. Huh. Oh, I see what's going on. Sorry about that. We're supposed to add these to an array, so I should do this instead. So, all right. So, empty array. So things are working out. We have this here, that there, that there. And as you can see now, the routes seem to be doing things accordingly, because now we don't have the home page. Let's see here. As you can see, we don't have the home page plugin. If I just type home over here, we should have it now. And there it is. It loads on this particular page, but it doesn't load on this other one here, right? Very good. Oops. And there it is. So this works here, but doesn't work anywhere else. On my profile page, it isn't there, and so on. Alrighty then. So far so good. Our routing system seems to be working just fine, so you can tell which plugin should go on which page. Alright, so I will see you in the next video where we do some more.